Welcome to FO Live. With me is Aidan Grogan. He's a history PhD candidate at Liberty University. We also have my colleague, Kaitlyn Diana. She's an associate editor at Fair Observer. Today, we're going to talk about something that the world's richest man, Elon Musk, has been raving about for months. Elon Musk says that the world is looking at a population crisis. He gives examples of countries like South Korea and Japan, two countries that are seeing a decline in fertility and birth rates. Aidan, you've written on this topic and you say that the United States is facing a similar doom. Can you tell our viewers more on that?
Sure. Well, the United States has a fertility rate of 1.6, which is below replacement level. Replacement level fertility is typically cited as about 2.1 children per woman. But this is not just a crisis that the United States faces. This is a truly global phenomenon. About two-thirds of people currently live in countries with sub-replacement fertility rates, and the Lancet Medical Journal projects that at least 95% of countries are going to experience sub-replacement fertility by the end of this century. The UN projects that the world population will start to decline by the mid-2080s, but they often adjust their forecast for world population. Some other forecasts predict that this is going to happen as early as the 2060s.
You also say that there is a fertility gap in the US. Basically, what that means is that people are saying that they want to have more kids, but they're not really having kids. Why do you think that is the situation?
Yeah, so Americans on average say that the ideal family size consists about 2.5 children, but the fertility rate is 1.6. So that's a considerable gap in the United States. That's a gap of almost one full child. So unforeseen life circumstances in any time or place can contribute to a fertility rate or individual fertility goals that are less than desired. And these can consist of anything ranging from difficulty finding a long-term suitable partner, health issues such as infertility, or of course, financial constraints. I think in the United States, as well as in Western countries in particular, we're facing a kind of mating and dating crisis. We have rising rates of singleness, especially among young men. Young men and young women have grown politically distant. Young women have shifted much further to the left, while young men have shifted a little bit to the right. So there's just a lot of friction between young men and young women, which I think is contributing to a mating and dating crisis. People are just not pairing up. Forming strong, long-term romantic relationships, getting married and having children in the way that they used to.
Caitlin, I want your opinion on that. Do you agree with Aidan's points that the US is currently having a mating crisis, and but it has a very good dating culture because
Um, yeah,
people are
actually,
meeting, but they're not really building families together.
yeah, no, I do agree, and I think it's great that you brought up too that like women are more gearing to the left, and that men are starting to gear more to the right. Because I am someone who is on the left, and I live in the South. I live in Savannah, Georgia, and dating here is very hard because a lot of the people who live down here are on the right, and so I do think that is a really big issue where people are going on dates. And something that happens with dating apps a lot too is that, especially down here, what I've noticed is that people will not be putting their political affiliations. So women have been going on dates with men, 6 7 dates, and then learning that their morals or their values don't align in some way, and then obviously they don't go any future dates after that. So I think we have really cultivated a dating culture to try to find a life partner. But I think it's harder because dating, like it gets harder to date because people are more and more divided in terms of morals and values. And we just keep seeing that divide just get a little bit bigger. So I do agree with that. Yes.
Aidan, you've also written that two kids per couple in the US would eventually lead to population collapse. What next for America? How do you avert this crisis?
So a recent study published in the journal PLOS One has indicated that the 2.1 figure often cited by economists and demographers as replacement level fertility might not be high enough. The researchers have argued that 2.7 might be a more accurate figure because the 2.1 figure doesn't take into account what's known as population stochasticity, which refers to a combination of random differences in the number of children people have, as well as mortality rates and sex ratio imbalances. This might not apply necessarily to the United States because we don't have much of a sex ratio imbalance and we have low mortality rates. But a country like China has a very high sex ratio imbalance as a result of the one child policy and the disproportionate abortion of girls due to the one child policy. So countries like China, as well as smaller countries that have a big sex ratio imbalance, are going to deal with that problem. So their fertility rate will have to be a bit higher if they're going to maintain population stability over the long term.
I want to talk about individual choices, and I think Kaitlyn, your perspective here would be brilliant because let's look at the modern day women. They have to balance both careers, they have to balance being independent, and they're still expected to have babies, raise a family, and ensure that the family stay together. Do you think modern life is too much for women to deal with? I mean, they have to balance between these traditional choices of having and raising a family, but also everything that modern life demands, which is a career and independence.
Certainly.
Sorry, you can go first, please.
Okay. So yeah, there are certainly pressures to have it all, so to speak, and it's an ongoing debate whether or not women can truly have it all. But it's still acceptable for women to pursue either a full time career or to pursue a life as a full time mother by not working or doing some combination of both. Whereas men are still expected to live up to that traditional masculine role of working full time and being a protector and a provider. So women do have a bit more of a choice in that regard, and the economist Catherine Pakaluk at the Catholic University of America published a book called Hannah's Children, where she interviews 55 college educated women who are all having five or more children. And they are part of a rare demographic in American society, consisting of about 5% of American women who are having five or more children. And so this is an outlier. This is a strange phenomenon to observe in our current culture. So she interviewed these women and inquired, why is it that they're having so many children? And she found that almost invariably it was religious sentiment and religious belief that motivated their desire to have a lot of children. They don't view children as a burden, but rather as a blessing. And they're willing to make that financial trade-off between other things that they could be doing with their lives and the arduous task of providing for multiple children. So ultimately, it comes down to people's attitude toward children and whether they view children as a blessing and a great enrichment to their lives, or as a potential burden or as something that interferes with other things that they can be doing.
I was just gonna add that I think, as somebody who, as a woman and who has seen, my sister has a son and my mom had three kids, and we've seen, and I have seen personally, how the reality of a lot of situations is that women also have to work on top of being a mother, just because two income households are much more needed than a singular income with today's economy. So it's not as easy for the man to be the full-time breadwinner and for the woman to just be a full, like, stay-at-home mom. And that's when people talk about 50-50 splits in like marriages when it comes to working and children. But what they don't account for is the fact that women also tend to be working themselves. So that 50-50 split is, we are both going to work, but then I come home and I take care of the kids and I do all the cooking and I do all the cleaning. And there's just a lot of burnout with that, and like women who want to focus on provide, like, and not even just providing a good life for themselves, like living above their means, but just providing in general for themselves. And there is more of a need for women to also be working alongside men in order to provide for the family, because providing for the family is very expensive. I mean, daycare alone is several $100s, a month, not to mention like if you have mortgages and whatever bills you have to pay on top of that, there's a good chance that you're both going to have to be working. So a part of it is that it isn't really a 50-50 split. It isn't like we stay home and we're mothers and you go to work. It's we go to work and then we come home, we have to be mothers, and then we have to do the cooking and then we have to do the cleaning. And it's not really that 50-50 split. It's two full-time jobs basically. And I think that's also where a lot of it comes from, is having to prioritize working over having a family, and then also feeling that having a family really doesn't align with your goals to work, because it just doesn't it's harder to do both at the same time without fully, like I said, burning yourself out. And there are women who genuinely do, like, they are fully capable and ready and willing to do that, and like, good for them. I believe that everybody should be allowed, when it comes to women, like, if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, be a stay-at-home mom. I'm never going to shame you for that. I think that we have also kind of created a culture where women feel afraid to say that they want to be stay-at-home moms, because then they're kind of getting called out for being like trophy wives or like not being feminist enough. And I think the feminism lies in the choice. And it's just a multitude of reasons. But, for most, not, I shouldn't say for most women, but for a lot of women that we're seeing now, like, the want of a child isn't necessarily overriding the everything else that kind of is factoring into their lives, and like having a child, like economics and time.
I'll jump to the economics later, but Aidan, I want your thoughts on what Kaitlyn mentioned, which is the burnout. I think that is something that many people don't take into consideration, because there's so much expected from women. They have to be good at their job, they have to have careers, family, and then do chores at home. Do you think the burnout is maybe one of the factors which is basically pushing women towards not having children and babies?
So I think people have a misunderstanding today that women never really worked until the 1970s. But historically, women always did work. They were just working in and around the home. So in agrarian societies, women were doing domestic work such as spinning or weaving, in addition to looking after their children, while men were out toiling in the fields. So men and women had a much more complementary relationship, and they both made an economic contribution to their families. And early on in the Industrial Revolution, women would join their husbands at work in the factories, and that led to a whole host of horrors. So throughout the 19th century, women were essentially consigned to the home, where they took on this exclusive stay-at-home mother role. And I think that gave rise to first wave feminism, where women felt that they were subordinated to men and made increasingly dependent on male earnings and men's wages. So they found their freedom in the 60s and 70s to go out and work and make more of a contribution to society, but they were working away from the home. They were going off and working in offices or working on assembly lines. And I think that's what's contributing to that burnout. Is it's hard to go off and work a 9 to 5 and take care of your kids at the same time. It's actually impossible. You have to send the kids off to daycare, especially if you don't have close relatives whom you can have your children spend time with while you go off and work. So on a previous appearance on Fair Observer, I made the case that an expansion of remote work would allow for more flexibility for women in particular to have more children and spend more time with them, sort of reviving the customs of pre-industrial agrarian life, rather than continuing in this current stage of the economic system where we expect both sexes to go off and work away from the home, which is leading to all sorts of problems as far as having and providing for families.
You've both touched on economics quite a lot, and you've emphasized on it, so I might as well jump into it. Aidan, you've written that people now see children as costs and not gifts. And that is true because you see the rise in dinks, which is double income, no kids, and you see dinkwads, which is again double income, no kids with a dog. Um, is parenting no longer rewarding? Do you think it's because of the kind of responsibilities that you have to take care of, or is it more of economics and how costly it is now to raise children and have a family? What do you think is the core issue here?
Yeah, so it comes down to a question of opportunity costs. Are people willing to make that financial trade-off between modern lifestyles of consumptive leisure and the arduous task of providing for several children? And I think a lot of times, increasingly, the answer is no. A Pew Research poll conducted last year found that only 45% of childless women under 30 in the United States say that they ever want to be mothers, compared to 57% of men who are childless under age 30. So we have this dink culture is very much on the rise. This is a pervasive antinatalism that we're seeing. But keep in mind, we live in the most abundant and prosperous time in human history. I think people take for granted how rich they truly are compared to history. For example, during the reign of Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus, the average person in the world was living on $2 a day in today's money. And that didn't change for many, many centuries. When William the Conqueror invaded England in 1066, the average person in the world was still living on about $2 a day in today's money. That didn't really change until the onset of the Industrial Revolution, which resulted in an explosion in wealth and health, to a point where even the poorest people among us are living like royals compared to history. But now we have this issue of a kind of keeping up with the Joneses mentality. When people say that they can't afford to have kids, it's not that they can't afford to have kids under any circumstances, but rather that they're not confident that they can provide those children perhaps with the ideal middle class or upper middle class lifestyle, with perfect dental health, nice vacations, designer apparel, and of course, a college education. So it's a question of the kind of future and the kind of life that people want to provide their children with. But if many people conclude that it's not worth having children unless they can be provided with this ideal upbringing, then we are going to be headed for a very precarious future.
Caitlin, I think we both like your perspective on whether parenting is even beneficial anymore.
So I also have a unique perspective because I have been someone who, since I was 16, has very much never wanted children. I have always known that I was not built to be a mother. It's not that I don't have maternal instincts. It's not that I don't have, I struggle to take care of myself. It's an everyday battle. And a lot of people, if they suffer from any kind of like mental health issues or things like that, where, they have a hard time even like getting themselves fed, getting themselves taken care of, every day is kind of a battle. It's hard to also even think about having children on top of that, because it's how am I supposed to take care of another living being when I can barely take care of myself? And then on top of that, and at least in my personal experience, I mean, we think about the baby formula shortages that have been happening, that especially happened, I think, during COVID. There was like a rise in how well, technically a fall, I should say, in access to baby formula, and people with the passing of the One Big Beautiful Bill don't have access to health insurance the way that they used to. And, I don't have health insurance. So even if I were to get pregnant, I would go into debt simply from being pregnant. Like I don't have the money to pay for even the pregnancy and the birth of it all, because, it's very expensive, like 60, 70,000 plus dollars, just to go into labor. And it isn't like, it is part of, can I give my child a comfortable life? But I think for a lot of people, what we're realizing too is like, can I even provide for a child, period? Can I provide food? Can I provide clothes? Can I provide housing? And I mean, for me personally, the answer is no, at least definitely not right now. I mean, my roommate and I can't even turn our AC on in the summer because our electric bill gets too high and we can't afford it. So it's, we're already living on limited means. And so when you have like people who are living on limited means and are struggling to pay their bills and are living paycheck to paycheck. As we have seen too, there are a lot of single mothers too. Like there's less dating, and there's a lot more of like, I'm single and I have a child, or single fathers. But I think for women, the problem lies in that we don't have the money per se, and then also once again that burnout and the energy and the ability to take care of a child, because the child rearing is going to come mainly, it's going to be the woman's job. Like that's why you still hear today when men are watching their children, it's, oh, he's babysitting, oh, he's babysitting the kids. And it's like, no, he's being a father, he's doing his job, like that's what he's supposed to be doing. But that isn't really how we see fatherhood and motherhood. Like motherhood is, you are taking care of the child in all of the ways, like the fits, and taking care of them, feeding them, getting them to daycare, getting them to and from school, all of that. And I'm not saying that fathers obviously don't help with that, and that there are plenty of families that do have that system where it's a very equal, we are both taking care of the kids. But more often than not, what you're seeing is women who are taking care of the kids and dads who get to be babysitters whenever it benefits them. So it's a mix of not having the funds, not having the time, not having the energy, and just all of it kind of, women just don't like, they don't see the benefit in motherhood, because motherhood is more and more a job than it is like a rewarding thing. And once again, I understand that motherhood is very rewarding for a lot of people, and I'm not trying to say that it isn't. My mother has a son, my sister is a mother, and obviously she loves her son. She's a great mother. It's rewarding for her. But for a lot of women, all of that effort isn't rewarding. And that's why we're seeing a lot more like women who are very adamant that they don't want children.
Aidan, I want your thoughts on that, because you say that even the poorest today were richer than the richest, even in the industrial ages. And then Kaitlyn feels that having a baby right now could pretty much bankrupt her in today's economy. I'm sure there are more women who feel that way. What are your thoughts on that, Aidan? Do you?
Yes, I certainly want to address concerns over cost, because in the latest UN Population Fund survey of about 14 countries, and the fertility patterns that are being exhibited, they found that 39% of people said that they fell short of their fertility goals due to financial constraints. And I think housing in the US in particular is a very big issue, especially for Gen Z. Many Zoomers are very concerned about the rising cost of living, and doubt that they're ever going to even be able to buy their own home. The cost of housing has gone up astronomically. Now the reasons for that are of course complicated. Number one, houses today are bigger than they were in the 1970s, for example. So you're getting more square footage per house. Also, we have outdated and restrictive zoning laws that prevent the construction of new housing. And so we have a housing shortage. So to bring the cost of housing down, we need to build a lot more houses. So I really take that issue seriously. People do want to have a nice home before they start families. But also, I have to address this at a deeper level, because the countries that have gone the farthest to try to give people economic incentives to have children by bringing down the cost of childcare and implementing baby bonuses and so forth have not seen any significant increases in fertility. And a wide range of countries have experimented with this, such as Canada, France, Sweden, Poland, Hungary, Japan, South Korea. In some cases, this doesn't lead to any increase in fertility at all. Poland, despite the widespread popularity of their Family 500 Plus program, is continuously seeing a declining fertility rate down to ultra low levels of fertility. And also, high-income women also have very low fertility. It's actually low-income women who have higher fertility than high-income women, which is contrary to expectations if cost is the great inhibitor here. So again, it does come down to this question of opportunity costs. If rich women aren't having kids, despite the fact that they can afford it, then we have to look deeper into the way that culture has changed, into the way that there's been a transformation of social norms and expectations.
Kaitlyn, would you agree on that?
I feel like I guess want to add on to you said that women who have like higher incomes tend to not have children versus women in lower incomes, and this is me just obviously with access to health insurance, like it's a lot harder to get when you don't have money, and so it also could be an access to birth control and things like of that nature, where women in lower income areas just don't have the same access to those resources as women in higher income areas, or with higher incomes, I should say. So there is like women who live in lower economic situations who have more children because they aren't able to necessarily go through the same routes of contraception and to avoid getting pregnant. Um, but I think like economics is only one factor. Like I said, it is also the fact that women feel, unsupported. It's not, it's, they don't have the bandwidth to handle taking on a child, because taking on a child is going to be a second full-time job, because a lot of women, even if they are married, like I stated earlier, they are going to be taking on a lot of that. They're going to be taking on most of that responsibility for themselves. So I think it's a mixture of not having economic means to take care of a child, but also it's a lot of work to take care of a child. And women who have the ability to choose more freely, who have more access to contraception and birth control in like better forms, like an IUD, which is the most, like one of the most effective forms of birth control and the longest lasting, they get to decide if they want to have kids or not, in a way that women from lower areas don't. And they're deciding that they don't want to have kids because they don't feel supported in doing so by the government, by the men in their lives. I mean, like I said, formula shortages and just the rising cost of, even if they have the money, and just the lack of support in terms of actually child rearing. And it's not the best situation to have children in. And a lot of women they have the choice now, and they're choosing not um, not to be mothers, basically.
I want to push deeper into this moral choice versus the economics of having children. And let me give you an Indian perspective. I'm sitting in the world's most populous country. A lot of the maternity programs here have worked. In fact, young mothers get paid a stipend by the government as long as they have two children. Any more, and then you don't get paid. So clearly, things have taken a different turn in India. That is how we ended up being the most populous country in the world. However, there is a big demographic shift happening here as well. I would say 40 to 50 years ago, women were having between 8 to 10 children. And a big purpose of that was basically to have extra hands in the house. And you're right, Aidan. At one point, they were all working women. They would work in the fields. They would work at home. They would sew clothes. They would sell them. They would be doing all kinds of small jobs, but they would also be having a lot of children. And in India, at least, a lot of children basically meant more income coming into the house. They could work in the fields. They could work as labor. They could do all kinds of things and get money into houses. Now, India has gotten richer. um, there is a large middle class in the country, and suddenly people are not having children. In fact, dinks and dinkwads have increased in India as well. And you would think that it's just an urban issue, but it's not. It's reached into rural areas as well, where people were having 8 to 10 children. Um, if you ask most Indians, it's not about economics. It's mostly about responsibility, and it's about now having the freedom to live the kind of life you want to live, where they see children as burden and as responsibilities. What do you think of that, Aidan? Do you think that is a big factor in the world having lesser population going forward, which is basically this freedom of running away from responsibility is what I would say is what most people are doing, because they think that it's too much of a task to raise children.
Yes, I think it's a growing emphasis on individual freedom, autonomy, and self-actualization without the corresponding responsibilities at the same time. In addition, there's been a global decline in non-numeric childbearing preferences. Um, when fertility preference surveys were first conducted, uh, those conducting the surveys, especially in rural areas of developing countries, would receive non-numeric answers such as, I don't know how many kids I want to have, or it's up to God, or I'll have as many children as God wills. But now those answers are very rare. They're so marginal at this point that it's not even worth considering. And what we've seen based on the latest UNFPA survey of those 14 countries, which comprise about 37% of the world's population, is that the average desire is just for 2 children. Now, some people want 3 or more, but they're mostly offset by those who want 1 or none. So the global ideal has changed significantly in recent decades, down to a point where the average person in the world just views 2 children as ideal. But then we have this problem of the fertility gap, where many people are not achieving that ideal. They're orienting their lives in such a way and prioritizing things to a point when they're finally ready to settle down and have those 2 children. In some cases, it's too late, or they don't find a suitable romantic partner, and so as a consequence, we have below replacement fertility rates. But I think something that's been overlooked in analyses of declining fertility rates is this disappearance of the implicitly pronatal, non-numeric, up to God mindset. And that's a consequence of secularization and the transformation of cultures and social norms.
Caitlin, I want you to chip in here because you were very clear that you don't want children. And I don't want you to touch on the economic side. I want you to talk about other factors that are maybe pushing more women towards such decisions.
Yeah, so aside from economics, like I said, when I say lack of support too, once again, I mean this in maybe like an emotional, a mental way, even like physical support of, like I said, women are going to be doing the child rearing. And for me in particular, I can explain this from my own reasoning as to why I do not want children. Like I said, I have a hard time taking care of myself every day. I mean, getting out of bed, getting to work, it exhausts me. I have to spend at least an hour of my day after I get off of work just rotting in bed because it takes all of my energy. Because I suffer from my own mental issues, like it takes all of my energy to do things, to take care of myself. So eating, like just basic necessary tasks. And some people have it even worse where they can't even like take care of themselves in like a cleanliness way, like brushing their teeth, taking a shower, things like that. And obviously, like those are really worst cases. But we've seen a big increase in like mental health issues too, I think. And I think that we should also kind of bring that into the discussion where a lot of people are having a harder time taking care of themselves for those reasons, because for whatever the system is in place, if it's because they don't have money so they're depressed, or if they just have like a pre-affliction to mental illnesses or things like that. COVID really exacerbated this and like really had it kind of come up where a lot of people were recognizing that they had these problems. And I think for women, it's just a mixture of, once again, that burnout and that desire to be independent and not being able to be independent and take care of themselves and also take care of a child in any capacity, not just economically. And also, I'm like, because women aren't wanting to settle down with the men who want to settle down with them, I think is a big issue. Like I said, I am someone who is on the left and I live in the South, and it goes deeper than just, oh, we have political differences. It's, you voted against my rights and you don't believe that I'm a full person really who deserves to be your equal. And so women also don't want to have children with men, period, because they are becoming more and more divided from men. Because we see when Trump won, there were people who were saying it's your body, my choice. It's your body, our choice. Like men were, gloating over having the ability to control women. And so there's also very much a factor of women feeling unsafe in having children, like forming relationships, because as I stated earlier, they go on 6, 7 dates with somebody and then they realize that not only it's not just that he's conservative, but that he's like a raging, MAGA, like he loves Trump. And it's like, oh, so there's just a fundamental divide between what women want and what they value and what men want and what men value. And since there's not an alignment, and there are like women who obviously are on the right who do want that family, and they do, like, I will have children because that's what God wants, and I'll have many children as God wants me to have. There are people who fall all over the spectrum, but if we're talking about like a general consensus, a big issue is also that women don't want to be having children with men. I've seen a lot of women who've talked about, I think it's South Korea, who has the 4B movement, I believe, where they're refusing to get married and to have children. And I've seen a lot of people, a lot of women in the United States talk about bringing that here, because they obviously we are rightfully terrified that the government is going to keep taking things away from us. I mean, Roe v. Wade got overturned, and we've seen how like dire that is for women. And so it is just, there's just so many different layers to why women don't want to have children anymore. But it's also, it just isn't the safest environment to do so. And it's not an environment that holds women as equals. And women are tired of not being viewed as equals, and they aren't going to settle to have children with men that they don't want to have children with, especially when a lot of men don't respect women and they don't really see women as anything other than wives or mothers. So there's also like that societal factor that plays a role as well.
Aidan, I feel like you wanted to say something.
I want to address the challenges for the future of the progressive left, because the left supports government programs such as Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, public education, SNAP benefits, etc., which require a fairly large tax base to subsidize. And if many people on the left are committed to an anti-natal mindset and are not going to bring up the next generation who will support the elderly in particular, that's going to result in pervasive challenges as far as maintaining those generous entitlements. Many progressives believe that immigration is the solution to this problem, but I think we should be wary of outsourcing reproduction to women in poor countries and acting as if that this is the duty of women in poor countries, so that women in rich countries can live more free, empowered lives. In addition, it's not as if there's an endless supply of immigrants who can come in and prop up our social support systems, because fertility rates are crashing everywhere in rich and poor countries alike. Margaret Thatcher said the problem with socialism is eventually run out of other people's money. Well, the problem with mass immigration is eventually run out of other people's people. So I think there's a strong case that can be made for a left-wing pronatalism. And the left historically was pronatal until the left-wing movement became somewhat co-opted by the Malthusians in the 1960s and 1970s, who were concerned about overpopulation and environmental degradation. And ever since, the left has been quite anti-natal. So I would personally hope for more left-wing pro-natal voices to arise and comprehend that a depopulation of the magnitude that is coming is a concern for people on both the right and on the left.
Kaitlyn, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't know if I necessarily have any extra thoughts on it. I would just say that for the people that I've seen on the left, I don't know enough about like the pronatal. You have way more like knowledge of the history and the context, and I can only kind of bring what I've seen, like lived and experienced. But for people on the left who do talk about like having children and like what it would take for them to like be able to like feel safe in doing so, it is just a matter of, you're talking about like the tax brackets, like you need like a certain amount to like have all of these benefits and to take care of like the older generations in order for them to, take care of us. But I think for a lot of people on the left, they don't feel taken care of. by the older generations and by the government. And so it's a matter of, we understand that if we don't have children, then there is a certain rise, or like, there's a loss of the population, and it's like the decrease in that way. And then also a rise in maybe people raising their children with very alt-right views, because those are the ones who tend to really stick to that traditional family setting. And so from my experience, I mean, the thing that a lot of people on the left talk about is just for the economics of it and the taxes of it all. Like, there are higher income people in this country who could stand to lose a couple of dollars in order to support those benefits that we are steadily losing, in a way that like doesn't fall on the people who are barely supporting the children that they have or like want to have. But I just want to say, I do agree with your point that we should not be relying on women from poor countries to like up our population, because it shouldn't be a burden onto them to do that for us. And I wholeheartedly agree that the solving this issue isn't going to come from just being like, well, let people come in with their children. And this isn't like an anti-immigration thing at all, any means. It's just more so we shouldn't have to force other women in other countries to have children and then come here in order for us to have like a stable population growth. But there are just, for the left, it's more of a matter of a top-down sort of situation where the funds and the resources and the things, like, they should be coming from the top. And because they're not, like, we aren't going to put children into the world when we can't support them and we don't have the resources coming from, the higher ups.
Right. So my final question is a bit controversial, and maybe Aidan, we can begin with you, and if Kaitlyn has any thoughts and comments on that, she can chip in. Do you think that Americans can put away their political differences and band together to, revive the concept of family, to basically avert what you call as a population decline?
I think that can only happen if there is a revival of more traditional social norms and a culture that is more rooted in religious beliefs. We've experimented with secularization for many decades now, and I think it has culminated in a decline in American social capital. People are more isolated and disconnected than ever. Historically, people found a lot of camaraderie in religious institutions and in voluntary associations of that kind, and those maintained the values and the beliefs that enabled our society to flourish. We were a free and virtuous society, emphasizing both rights and responsibilities. But today we place a lot more emphasis on autonomy, self-actualization, and kind of a more radical conception of freedom, to a point where those responsibilities are not taken as seriously. The political divisions in our country are very stark, and I don't see them being healed anytime soon. But throughout American history, there have been these sort of spontaneous revivals of religious belief and religious sentiment. They were known as the Great Awakenings, and personally, I think that it would be the only way that there would be a revival of pronatal and pro-family social norms. I don't see any other source from which that can ultimately derive in a way that will be impactful. But I'm eager to see what the left can do about this and how they can re-strategize and put forth a pronatalism that takes into account some of the things that the left is most concerned about, especially having a robust system of public support to essentially take care of people who are struggling. And I think that's the great task of the left throughout this century. If they don't figure it out, well, they're just going to have fewer and fewer children, and the possibility of the progressive future that they're fighting for looks to be not able to be realized.
Kaitlyn, same question for you. Do you think Americans can put their political differences aside and revive the concept of family?
So not I kind of don't think it's necessarily because it's not just political differences. I think I should say that. Like for politics nowadays isn't just about politics. Like I said, it is very much a set of morals and of values. And so, you see a lot of people who voted for Trump who is very anti-gay, anti-woman, person of color, just very hateful, and he doesn't really stand for a platform that promotes a lot of, love, and not to be like love, peace, and the hippie movement, but and you know what I'm saying, like equality and things like that, and just respect for others. So I think the problem is that like we are so divided as a country. Sometimes I see the numbers in the polls of like how many people like are on the left and how many people on the right, and it reminds me a lot of like the Spanish Civil War, like right before, when it was like a 49% split, where it's just very, very divided, and it's not just politics, it is ethics, it's morals. And so I think it would take, I don't even know how we would even go about, because it's hard to find common ground, find a middle ground when somebody is like actively voting against your right to exist, your right to life, your right for anything. And so it isn't just a matter of, oh, like we need like a common goal. It's we are fundamentally on two opposing sides. And like, how do you reconcile that? Like, how do you reconcile with the fact that like I am, a queer woman, and someone on the very far, and I'm saying this, I do mean like alt-right, I do mean like near fascism, or some people who do proudly proclaim to be fascist, are very, there's only one kind of person that we accept in society. And it's not just a matter of like, oh well, it's okay, let's find some middle ground. It's like, no, there is no middle ground, because I'm not going to try to compromise with somebody who genuinely does not think that I have a right to be here, or that I should have rights, period. So I think, especially too with the disillusionment of religion, a lot of people do not find, like you said, we are more secular. And as an atheist myself, I have no problem with belief in spirituality, and religion in that manner. But we do also have a problem where there isn't really a separation of church and state the way that there needs to be. And so a lot of people are disillusioned with religion in that way too, because they feel that religion is a big part of why our government does a lot of things that it does. And so I think even if we could all band together under religion, there's just too many people who've been hurt by it and who don't necessarily, I don't want to say respect and I mean like the institution of like the church. I don't mean God and spirituality and religion in that way, but I mean the very institutionalized like version of it. So I don't even know if religion would be a way for us to bridge that gap, because I think there are just too many people who don't really want the church in their life, or like religion in their life in that way, because it has informed so much of policy already. And I think there's a bigger rise in like secularism and atheism as a pushback against that as well. So I think even trying to, not necessarily like trying to, because I know that's not what you're saying, but like a rise in like more people being religious and like finding that as like a common thing to combine us. It's a lot harder too when you have people who are from different religions, where it's not just one singular religion anymore. Like you have people who are Jewish, and you have people who, my family is Mormon, and so it's like, what is also the one religion that would? There's just too many factors that I think somehow also still divide us even more in its own way, that I think kind of hinder that coming together and being able to be like, yeah, like we can bridge this gap, because it's a very big divide, and I think it keeps getting bigger.
All right. Before we end, Aidan, just very quickly, your top three things that you believe that the American society needs to do to basically reverse this fertility gap.
Number one, I think it would have to come through a revival of more pronatal social norms, and a culture that values family, and that can't come through government. So that's quite a challenge. Number two, I think on the public policy front, we need to bring down the cost of housing. And the solution to that is to build more housing and to get rid of some of these outdated and restrictive zoning laws that prevent the construction of new housing. Number three, I think it's critical that we reform entitlements and cut taxes to keep more money in young people's pockets so that they can afford to have bigger families, or to have the number of children at least that they say they would want to have. Of course, people are just not as pronatal and family oriented as they used to be, and that's a consequence of changes in culture. But I do think in limited capacities, there are public policy reforms that can perhaps produce at least marginal increases in the fertility rate.
Thank you, Aidan and Kaitlyn. This was a wonderful discussion. And to all our viewers, if you would like to know more about Aidan's work, you can always click on the link in the description box below. Thank you, Aidan and Kaitlyn, for the time.
Thank you.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.